Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and I've been watching these the congressional hearings about crypto, and if I had to give you three main themes, here's the three. The first one is that Brian Brooks is a rock star. The second one is that Congress, I believe, seems to be coming around on crypto, and they're all wanting to solve this issue. And the third is that Gary Gensler is an asshole. Okay? That's the three themes. I mean, it's very obvious to anybody that's watching and anybody that's paying attention. Gary Gensler looks like a complete horse's ass, or maybe worse. I mean, he looks like he's a political animal instead of doing the job that agency was put together for. And he looks really, really bad, and he deserves every single bit of it, and so does Jay Clayton. Jay Clayton nobody needs to forget Jay Clayton in this thing, because he's the one that started this whole thing. Nobody needs to forget that. Now, everybody that's listening to my voice, when you see a congressman that's tweeting something positive like this, you need to retweet him and let him know, let him see how excited people are about him being on board. He says this is Congressman William Timmons. Digital assets are the future of finance, whether we in Congress are ready for that or not. It is critical the U.S. continues to lead the way in the space by creating a regulatory space that enables this emerging part of finance to blossom here at home. I have a lot of video, but first I wanted to make sure we remind you that American crypto innovation has been under siege. SEC versus Ripple started 320 days, 14 hours, 27 minutes, and 13 seconds ago. And we are still under siege until Gary Gensler could make this case go away today if he wanted to. So he continues to want to be the bad guy, because that's exactly what he is. All right, I'm going to play you some clips. Here's one from Brian Brooks.
Or I'll do you one better on your hypothetical, which is we've now seen major banks deplatforming both industries and individual customers for not sharing the right point of view. So these are scary ideas. The point of crypto is to have true decentralization, and the projects that succeed will be the projects that achieve that. Bitcoin succeeded because there are literally millions of participants in the node network, and so there is no CEO of Twitter to deplatform you. There's no CEO of JP Morgan to take away your credit card. It's user controlled. Some of these won't achieve that. They'll be consigned to the ash heap of history, I predict.
Thank you very much. I'll yield back, man.
Okay. I got a bunch of clips, and Brian Brooks is the man. So there's a lot of them with
Mr.
him.
Lukemeyer, it's terrific to see you again. And I'd give you a couple of thoughts on that important question. One is, if we start with stable coins before we talk about other crypto assets, I've said for a long time that the secular reduction in dollar holdings as a percentage of global central bank holdings is alarming. And this has been going on for more than 10 years at this point. So dollars as a share of the European Central Bank, the Japanese Central Bank, et cetera, has shrunk from 80+% to more like 60+% in a short amount of time. What that tells me is that in the future, with the rise of China and other major economies, the US dollar can't take its primacy for granted, and we need to start thinking about competing on utility, on features, not just based on a post-World War II monetary system that we could take for granted for the last two generations. And that's one of the reasons that I've been such a supporter of internet-enabled dollars, which allow us to compete on features, not only on history. I think that's really critically important. The second thing I would tell you is, as we enter year 11 or 12 of a highly inflationary environment, after all, we've been printing enormous numbers of new dollars since the financial crisis, there will come a time, gradually then suddenly, when the attractiveness of the dollar relative to other currencies could change. One of the benefits of the crypto economy is that it creates some counter incentives on the part of the Fed to do that kind of policy, because people will flee to other kinds of assets. And that sort of market competition is something that I think will ultimately shore up our monetary policy and keep the dollar where it rightfully ought to be, which is as the dominant reserve currency it's been for all of our lives.
Great answer. Okay, and then I told Congress in this one, I clipped this one out, And I said, this should sum up your entire hearing. This is the root of the problem. I believe this is why they had the hearings today, because everybody's so pissed off about the SEC and the way they've handled this Ripple thing. I believe that the hornet's nest that was kicked up by Jay Clayton and then Gary Gensler is really what eventually led to these hearings. So listen to what he says here.
In my old agency, the OCC, what would happen is a bank would come to us with a new activity proposal, and we would give them an answer. We would either give them a non-objection or we would not give them a non-objection, and it was very clear whether they would be allowed to access that. What happens in the United States is you have a new crypto project, and you walk into the SEC and you describe it in great detail, and you ask for guidance, and they say, we can't tell you, and you list it at your own peril.
Boom. That right there is the problem. That sums up the problem. Everybody knows it's the problem. Either somebody needs to revamp the SEC or they need to get rid of Gary Gensler. Something needs to happen. And Congress, somebody needs to hold this guy accountable and quit dealing with this guy with kid gloves, because I've always believed, I think Gary Gensler is one of those guys that comes off as this harmless guy. I think he's cutthroat. I think that's who that guy is. I've known people like it in my life. They literally practice coming across as this unassuming guy, but behind the scenes, he's vicious. That's what I think. And I've talked to people who think the same thing too. That's what you're dealing with here. And you don't deal with people like that with kid gloves. You deal with them the same way that they are. Okay. Then there was this clip from Brian Brooks. He really did well today. Let me hit
Miss asked the question of people have the potential to lose a lot of money. These things are volatile. They're risky. How do we protect them from those kinds of issues? There are two ways of answering that. One is to prevent as many people as possible from accessing this amazing technology. For example, the way the current legal regime works is certain kinds of assets can only be purchased by accredited investors, meaning rich people. So the only people who can get rich on this are people who are already rich. That'd be one way of protecting people from losing money, is to make sure that only the richest can access it. Another way of addressing it would be to make it safer the way that we made equities safer 40 years ago, right? We created mutual funds, diversification, sector funds, and other things that make it easier for regular Americans from places like my hometown in Colorado to buy equities without having to be stock experts. Strangely, in the US, we've refused to do that so far. So we don't allow crypto mutual funds. We don't allow people to diversify the way that they do in Canada, Germany, Singapore, the United Arab Emirates, and a series of other regulated economies around the world. So I would argue the way to win is to bring more people into the system more safely, not to keep them out at their own peril.
And once again, who's keeping that from happening? Gary Gensler. The history books aren't going to be kind to this guy. He's going to look very anti-American.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ms. Haas, let's continue. SEC Chairman Gensler has indicated on multiple occasions that, and I quote, the test to determine whether a crypto asset is a security is clear. However, Commissioners Peirce and Roisman noted that they believe there to be an obvious lack of clarity for market participants around the application of securities laws to digital assets and their trading. The lack of clarity is clear through the numerous requests that the SEC receives for these no action letters. In your view, is additional guidance defining clear rules of the road for investors and market participants needed at this time?
Thank you for the question. We believe this is a very important area of focus for the SEC and this committee. We do agree that the laws are clear. However, existing laws, regulation, and legal precedent make it clear that blockchain tokens are not securities. So we believe that the law clearly shows that blockchain-based digital assets are one of two things, either a new form of digital property or a new way to record ownership, as Brian Brooks spoke earlier about. We do believe that clarity is needed because these are new assets. It's a new way of transacting with these new protocols that we spoke about, and I think it would benefit all of us in the ecosystem to have agreed upon definitions.
I couldn't agree more, and I would hope that Chairman Gensler would be listening to his commissioners and some of the feedback that you all are giving.
Gary Gensler's not listening to anyone. All right, here we go. I take that back.
So
he is listening to someone. Maybe George Soros. Maybe that's who he's listening to. And Elizabeth Warren.
So given your previous experience running the OCC, I'd love to hear your perspective on where a regulator's authority begins and ends. Remember the joke earlier this year that everything's infrastructure? Well, it seems like Chairman Gensler thinks that everything is a digital asset that he can regulate. He cites the Howey and the Reeves test without providing any other explanations. So, Mr. Brooks, what are we missing? Because Chairman Gensler clearly doesn't see a limit to his regulatory authority in this area.
Well, Congressman, one thing I learned running my little agency is that the U.S., and this is not specific to crypto, the U.S. is sort of unique among the developed countries in our fragmented approach to regulation. So when I hear people talk about the idea that we need one regulator for crypto, I would say we should first have one regulator for banks, but we have 3 of them. Or if you're an investment bank, 5 of them. So that's inherent in the system that we've got. What I say to that is the last thing we need to do is add another regulator to a system that's already got dozens of regulators. What we need to do instead is have parity for crypto activity along with traditional finance. If I'm a crypto lending platform, I should probably be regulated by the FDIC. If I'm a crypto trading platform, I should probably be regulated by the CFTC and SEC. But somehow we treat crypto, because it's new, as different from everything else. And I'm going to argue that crypto is just a step function improvement in the system. We already have a regulatory system. The laws are super clear how it works. But there's something about crypto that scares people. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because it's new. But I remember in my banking law class when banks were first allowed to use computers to keep ledgers, people sued over that at the time. I remember when I was a second-year lawyer and we got email, and the ABA said lawyers couldn't use email because it would travel over this mysterious network of computers. These all seem ridiculous today, but it seems like we haven't really learned the underlying lesson, which is technology usually advances human flourishing. We have a regulatory system. Let's use it.
Thank you for that.
Okay, great clips today. And then there was this. This guy accuses Gary Gensler of being a liar and a fraud.
The exact line was, I think he's a liar and a fraud. So, and I kind of break it down in detail in the report, but I think he was dishonest in front of Congress when it came to his answers to Rep. McHenry on the safe harbor and his knowledge of it and whether he'd reviewed it with Commissioner Peirce. I linked to the video. You can kind of tell for yourself. I think he's been dishonest about his whole approach with exchanges. His line that he continues to trumpet, come in, talk with us, engage, is nonsense, because most of the big exchanges have broker-dealers and they're stuck in limbo. So the broker-dealers that they have acquired have not yet been approved to handle digital asset trading. So come in and talk to us, but you can't actually do anything, even though you have these licenses and you've been waiting for our approval. It's absurd on its face. I think there is no person with 2 eyes and the ability to reason that would think their approach to the crypto ETFs and the Bitcoin ETFs in particular is anything other than Wall Street friendly and retail investor hostile. So what he's actually engaged in is hostage taking when it comes to the approval of the spot ETFs.
And then we've got this. Greg Kidd says it funnier than anybody has said it yet. This is Greg Kidd explaining what happens when you go into these regulators like the SEC.
The SEC is saying, come on in and have a chat. I've had some of those chats, and usually I leave there with a bit less clothing than I went in with, and sore in some unmentionable spots. And so it'd be one thing if they said, come on in and let's talk about the rules, but they're saying come on in and they're not clarifying the rules. And so they're basically telling you to kind of like unzip yourself, and then they'll figure out like how much they want to take out of what you got. And so it hasn't really been a two-way street. It's without rules, without clarity. It's basically still a shakedown environment. It's regulation by enforcement rather than regulation by rules or principles. And that leaves everybody just running scared.
And Greg Kidd is the one that referred to the SEC as like they do business like Tony Soprano. And so luckily we have the XRP meme guy in the community, because he says, got a blockchain related business, you got to go in and register. Actually, forget about it. They're not your friends. And he copied Greg Kidd and me on this. The Securities and Exchange Commission, he's got Gary Gensler as Tony Soprano, and there's Elizabeth Warren. And then Paulie, I guess, is Hinman. And then back here you got Joseph Lubin. I can't remember which one that is. I can't remember which guy these two guys are. But anyway, Jay Clayton's in there. So there's your SEC mafia. And that's about right. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, tell your friends and family that according to Greg Kidd, the SEC is being run like Tony Soprano's